Alright, hello and welcome to another reading vlog. You're gonna have to forgive me because I'm still kind of figuring out this format. I don't lead a very interesting life, and so finding things to talk about other than what I'm reading in kind of stilted, confused terms, because I struggle to really assess what I'm reading in the moment or immediately after. So I'm working on that. I'm trying to figure out ways I can intersperse fun things into it, and also just talk more coherently about pretty much anything at this point is what I'm going for. But for now, you've got me. Trust me, I also wish it was better, but the only way I can get better is to keep trying. So we'll see how this goes with that introduction. So it's 2021, and a lot of people are posting kind of videos where they talk about their goals for 2021, which made me think about what my goals are. And I realized that I actually have some pretty concrete goals, sort of subconsciously, but rather than just kind of talk about them, I thought that I would try to, for the next week, kind of read books that embody those goals so I can try to start 2021 off on the right foot, rather than realizing that I had these goals, in September or October, and then sort of feeling like I'd let the year slip away. I have kind of 5 goals that I've thought of for 2021, so I'll talk about those, and then I'll talk about 3 books that I'm going to be reading that satisfy some or all of those goals, and allow me to start 2021 off on the right foot. So first, the goals. I don't really have a number of books I want to read or anything too stifling, because I think that would be a really infuriating experience for me to have really rigid, super ambitious goals for 2021, and I think my goals really embody that. So my first goal is to just read more books off of my physical TBR. I don't buy books that frequently, but I still do buy books sometimes, and I have tons of books that I've been wanting to read and wanting to get to for a long time, and just haven't made the time for them because it's so much easier to pick up library books that have a really clear deadline. And so one of my goals for 2021 is to do some work on that physical TBR and read a good number of books from my physical TBR. No set number, just I want to try to read more of them because I'm not reading that many of them right now. My second goal for 2021 is related but different, which is that I want to read more books off of my non-physical TBR. I have kind of a running list of books that I keep track of that I've heard about from people or YouTube or whatever that sound interesting to me that I want to pick up, and oftentimes the newest, brightest things on the list become really appealing, and I end up reading a lot of books that I've just heard about and not necessarily picking up older recommendations that were really exciting to me at one point that I've just forgotten about. And so I want to also put a dent in the TBR that existed as of 2020. So rather than just picking up books that I learned about in 2021, regardless of when they're published, that I learned about them in 2021, I also want to pick up books that I learned about, even if I didn't buy them, that I learned about in 2020 or before. My goal number 3 is that I want to listen to or read more audiobooks. I have often stated that audiobooks are kind of hit and miss for me because I like to process my stories pretty quickly and get through them pretty quickly, and so I want to experiment with some more audiobooks and figure out exactly what types of books work for me and which don't. I already know some restrictions that I put on myself, but I want to know if there's a broader swath of books that I could be reading that I'm not by audiobook, because I've noticed that reading audiobooks really does increase the amount that I read by quite a bit. So I want to be able to consume as many books as possible in audiobook format because it does make reading a lot that much easier for me. And so I want to read more audiobooks in 2021. My fourth goal is to read more books that aren't just novels. I read a lot of fiction, and I read a lot of novel-length fiction. This goal kind of comes from the fact that I want to not just read more nonfiction, but I also want to read more collections of things. I like the idea of them a lot, but I've just not read very many collections of short stories or collections of essays, and so I want to dive more into those and read more of those because I think that that's a really cool, interesting genre of literature that I don't consume as much as I want to. And so I want to read more non-novel length fiction, which is the vast majority of what I read right now. And then my final kind of broad goal for 2021 is that I want to read diversely. I actually did a pretty good job of this in 2020. I was pretty happy with myself, where I believe of the 54 authors that I read, only 15 of them were white men. Going forward into 2021, I want to really put more of an effort into reading translated works, because I have found that with Murakami and Han Kang, some of my favorite books have been translated, and I don't want to miss out on so many books that I hadn't read up till now just because I hadn't read very many translated works. And I really want to put more of an effort into reading from voices that I haven't yet read from. For example, I don't think I've ever read a book by a gender non-binary person, and I'd like to. I want to read more globally. So I just want to increase the diversity of my reading and just kind of take another step beyond what I did in 2020 to further that even more. So those are my 5 goals. Now I'm going to talk about the 3 books that I'm going to read over the course of this vlog that will kind of satisfy a good chunk of those goals. I'll be reading 3 books that cover all 5 goals, basically. And the first book is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. So this is a book that I've had on my physical TBR for a very long time. I can't even remember where I bought this book, but I know that I had it going into my freshman year of college. So it has been a very long time because I am now a senior in college. The Bell Jar is about a woman who moves to New York, I believe, to pursue something in the fashion industry, but then about her mental health problems and her struggles with depression and anxiety, I believe. I'm really interested to read this because I read a lot of Sylvia Plath poetry this past year for a class I was taking, and Sylvia Plath famously struggled with mental health, and so I think it'll be really interesting to read this fictionalized memoir sort of hers and actually get it off of my physical TBR because I've been wanting to read it for literally years and I just haven't. So I'm excited to pick that up. The next book is an audiobook, and for that I'm going to listen to Cress by Marissa Meyer, which is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles. So the Lunar Chronicles is a YA science fiction fantasy series where every book is kind of vaguely based off of a well-known established fairy tale, but it takes on a very different spin with some like very different futuristic elements. I listened to the first 2 books on audiobook already, and I've really been enjoying it. I haven't read YA in a really long time, and I think there's definitely something to be said for throwing in some YA every once in a while, just reading books that are different from each other. I am excited to continue on with that. I have so far been enjoying the audiobooks, and so I'm excited to pick up Cress as an audiobook as well. And so that is what I'm going to read for my audiobook. The 3rd book I'm going to read actually covers the 3 remaining goals, that being read from more diverse authors, read more short story collections, poetry, just works that aren't long-form fiction, and also read a book that's been on my non-physical TBR for a very long time. That book is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. So this book is a short story collection, and Maria Machado is a Latina woman. I read her memoir last year and loved it, and loved her writing, and so I'm very excited to read a short story collection from her. I am really excited about the prospect of reading more short stories because I just read so few right now. I think the more I read, the more I'll grow to enjoy it and understand it. Also, I've had that book on my TBR since I think Kayla from Books and Lala talked about it in a vlog like a year ago, like maybe March or April of last year. I honestly can't remember, but it's been almost a year that I've wanted to read that book. And I've gotten it from the library actually a bunch of times, but haven't gotten to it. And so I actually want to get to it and clear that off my mind. So those are the 3 books that I plan on reading. I will bring you along with me as I read them and hopefully do something that makes this vlog more interesting than my other vlogs. Already my intro has been very long, so I'm going to just stop talking and I'll see you once I have something to report.
Okay, so it is Thursday. I did not really read it all yesterday. I ended up having a lot of work to do, but it is Thursday night now, and I have actually gotten a good amount of reading done today, so I figured I'd check in and update you all on where I'm at. First, I'm about a quarter of the way through my audiobook, Cress. I'm liking it so far. Honestly, I found all 3 books to be pretty entertaining. Nothing particularly exceptional about them per se, but I think the audiobooks are really easy to listen to and kind of fades into background noise a little bit, but is not that difficult a story to follow, so it's convenient to put on when I'm driving or when I'm doing a whole host of other things, and so I tend to get through the audiobooks pretty quickly because they don't require that much attention, which is super convenient, honestly. There's not a whole lot I can say about what's going on without spoiling it, so I won't, but I was looking through my old Goodreads, because I don't use my Goodreads anymore, but I used to when I was in middle school and early high school, and I realized that I've read this entire series before, but for the life of me, I cannot remember what happens in a single one of these books. So I'll be interested to know what ends up happening, even though I've already read these books. I have no recollection. The other book that I have started at this point is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, and I am really enjoying it. I think there are certain themes from In the Dream House that still really exist in Her Body and Other Parties. I've only read the first story, which is The Husband Stitch, which is kind of all about what women give away to the men they love and what men insist on taking from the women they love, and kind of about the relationship between men and women in marriages and in relationships. I almost felt like while I was reading it that I was reading a horror story, even though it's not horror, just because it's so concerning with respect to how women very frequently get treated in relationships and marriages. And I think Maria Machado does a really good job of writing about the nuances of abuse. My goal for tomorrow is to finish Her Body and Other Parties or Cress. I want to finish one or the other and then pick up The Bell Jar, which is the third book I want to read, by Saturday. I will check back in with you once I've read a little bit more of either of them, and hopefully with some fun footage of what my day looks like, even though I have no fun plans, so we'll see. Okay, it is Saturday morning, and what I've learned so far from this vlog experience, and the last one honestly, is I just need to do a better job of checking in every day. I am truly garbage at that, but here I am, and I have some updates. Update number 1 is that I finished Cress. I finished the audiobook completely. I'm actually really excited about the fact that I've discovered a new niche of audiobooks that I can listen to and really enjoy, and that is YA, or just kind of books that can kind of go on in the background. I sort of feel guilty when I listen to audiobooks of books that have a lot of literary merit. I find it really difficult to pay a lot of close attention to audiobooks, and so I still don't think audiobooks will become my main mode of reading, but I'm glad that I found kind of a new niche of audiobook that I can enjoy, because reading by listening to audiobooks is so convenient and it feels like a new way of experiencing the story, and so it allows me to read even when I don't necessarily feel like looking at something and reading. I don't really know, I can't say much about Cress without spoiling the entire series, but what I will say is I think I'm honestly impressed with Meyer and how well she's constructed a YA series. In a lot of ways, it feels like Stormlight Archive, or like a much larger, more intricate story, just because of how well she threads together different plot lines and how compelling she's made all of her plot lines and all of her characters, and also the fact that there is consistently high stakes throughout. I'm honestly not confident in the survival of any of the characters, but not in a way that feels cheap or throwing in deaths just for the sake of throwing in deaths. I think that was a frustration that I had when I read the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas, which I read years ago now, and I found that I was frustrated because I felt like it dragged on too long, and also everyone had to be paired up at the end just for the sake of being paired up. And I, so far have not felt that with the Lunar Chronicles, which I've been really impressed by. I have one book left, Winter. I'm also going to listen to that one on audiobook, but I will start that after I finish The Bell Jar and Her Body and Other Parties. I've not made any progress on either of those since we last checked in, but that is my update for you, and I will check back in with you, ideally later today, if not tomorrow morning. I will also splice in some footage because we're going to take my puppy out into the real world for the first time, kind of desensitize her and socialize her to a more people-crowded area. So I will check back in with you when more has happened. It is Monday morning. I'd say I'm making steady but not breakneck progress. So I finished Cress a couple days ago, and I'm about halfway through Her Body and Other Parties at this point, and I've just started The Bell Jar. I started The Bell Jar before I finished Her Body and Other Parties because I kind of needed a bit of a break. While certain moments and stories within Her Body and Other Parties are really impactful, I'm finding myself a little bit off-put by certain elements of it. Specifically, there's a lot of sexual discourse and dialogue. This was something that also existed within In the Dream House, but since that was a book about her abusive relationship, the conversations about sex seemed really relevant because they spoke to the way that she was manipulated with sex. Versus here, I think the extent to which sex is used and described and talked about has made me a little uncomfortable. It's just a little bit too much for me, and so I decided to put it away for a bit and then kind of come back to it interspersed with The Bell Jar, since it is a short story collection, and maybe then it'll feel a little bit less overwhelmingly graphic. I am confident in my ability to finish both of them, but to be honest, I just really want to listen to the audiobook for the fourth Lunar Chronicles book instead of reading these two. But that's part of the reason that I switched to reading The Bell Jar, because I was getting a little bit of tired with Her Body and Other Parties. And now that I have kind of two books I'm switching between, I think I'll be able to maintain my momentum a bit. But I will check in and let you know if anything whack happens in either of these books. In the meantime, I will check in again. But that's what I've got for you right now. Okay, so I'm a big planner. I really like scheduling and structuring things and knowing when things are going to get done and how I'm going to do them. The problem is I'm actually total crap at estimating how long things are going to take me and how much I'm going to procrastinate on them. So with that in mind, we have learned I am not good at the vlog style video. I was supposed to have finished The Bell Jar and Her Body and Other Parties by Tuesday. It's Thursday. I'm this far into The Bell Jar and a little more than halfway done with Her Body and Other Parties. And the frustrating thing is I'm really liking both of them. I've gotten to a story in Her Body and Other Parties that's about body dysmorphia and kind of the way we perceive overweight people in our culture. And it's really non-sexual, which is exactly what I've been looking for. And The Bell Jar is really fun so far, honestly, which I wasn't expecting from a, modern classic. Why am I such a disaster? I have finished Cress. I'm like a third of the way through The Bell Jar and halfway through Her Body and Other Parties, and I just need to finish them. I figured I would just check in with you and let you know it's Thursday, and I know I'm behind. Realistically, other things are always gonna have to take precedence, so this might be another, oops, this is supposed to be 1 week and it's going to be a month-long ordeal. If so, I'm sorry that you have to watch that, because I'm sure it's not that interesting, but that's where I'm at right now. So, we'll see. We'll see if I ever actually read. Okay, check in on Wednesday. I did successfully finish Her Body and Other Parties, and I actually ended up overall liking the whole thing a lot more than I thought I would, just based on the first couple of stories. I think especially the first 2 or 3 stories were very graphically sexual, and the last 2 or 3 stories were much less so, and that was my largest complaint, is that it was a little bit over the top and exhausting to read. I don't know what I would rate it overall, just because there was enough moments in the middle where it kind of lost me. So as a whole, maybe like 3.5 stars, maybe a 4, but there was enough kind of stories in there that felt unnecessary or kind of uninteresting to me that, I don't know. But I finished it, which means I only have 1 book left to read. I'm almost halfway through. I'm going to do a little bit more reading of it today, and hopefully get this done very soon so that I can be done with this vlog and let you know what I think of it. So far, so good. Okay, let's make this a little debrief, because a lot has happened since last we spoke, and since the first clip of this video, honestly. I've certainly fallen flat of certain goals, but also accomplished certain goals, and let's just process what happened. Starting off with the book. I finished The Bell Jar, which is the last book that I intended to read for this vlog. This book ended up surprising me a lot, actually. I think I went into it assuming I wasn't going to like it very much. I'm not even sure why. I think I kind of have this negative tilt in my head towards classic novels, just because there's been a lot that I've been forced to read for school that I haven't ended up enjoying. But maybe because this is more of a modern classic, or maybe because of Sylvia Plath and her writing style, I really loved this book. This book is kind of two-toned in that, on the one hand, it's about a woman's descent into really severe mental illness and suicidal thoughts and tendencies, and her time in asylums and the way that insanity, especially female insanity, was treated in her time. And that's all really dark and grim and serious. But then on the other hand, it's very funny and witty and about love and sex and the expectations of society and eschewing those expectations. And these two kind of very different colorings come together in a very satisfying way in this book. I think I would have just perceived it as like a dark comedy if it wasn't semi-autobiographical, kind of like a little bit of fictionalized autobiography, and Sylvia Plath hadn't ended up killing herself. If she had ended up living a long and happy life kind of deal, it would just be this funny glimpse into the absurd way mental illness was treated in her time. I'm very intrigued by the fact that I find it really difficult to gauge and judge this book based just on itself. My brain has to bring in to the context of this book the fact that Sylvia Plath herself struggled with mental illness and ended up killing herself.
And I don't know, there's like all this conversation about whether or not authorial intent matters. And I think kind of parallel to that conversation is the conversation of, is a book just the book, or do you have to take into context the author and the author's life? And like, how much should you view a book as just this singular isolated thing versus this piece in a much larger puzzle that you're understanding and unfurling about this author? And I'm not really sure where I land on that yet, but I think that this book is a really clear example of a book where I don't think it makes sense to remove the context of Sylvia Plath and just perceive it as a story on its own. Because I think that Sylvia Plath's history and story and life makes the book even richer. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I would definitely recommend picking it up, especially if you're, say, looking for a more approachable classic. That is the end of book talk. Now we're on to kind of general debriefing thoughts about this experience. This is, I'd say, like the 3rd or 4th vlog I have tried to film. And generally, I think what happens is I am not good at setting TBRs for myself and a specific time within which I have to read it and just following it, just because, sometimes, say, with like the Lunar Chronicles, for example, I get really invested in series and I don't want to pick up some other random book. I want to finish the series. Or sometimes life kind of gets in the way and, maybe it's not that feasible for me to read 3 books in a week, and I have to be aware of that and be realistic. So it ended up taking me basically this entire month, like 3 weeks, to read these 3 books. And although I read a lot of other books in the meantime, setting like very specific TBRs for myself has been met with middling success, I'd say, to low success. So that's something that I have to think about. This was definitely supposed to take like the first week of January, and it's been a month, and I'm not mad at myself or anything, but it's something that I'm considering moving forward because I do like doing this kind of video, and I do like kind of talking about every book as I read it and thinking more critically about each book right after I finish it. And I also like having these kind of like themed books that I put together, and it forces me to pick up these books that I've always wanted to read but have just put off reading for so long, and it encourages me to read more. So there's a lot of benefits to doing this kind of video, but I think I just have to be more realistic in the future of what is and isn't feasible for me. So that's not that interesting for you, I'm sure, but that's something that I'm thinking about as I wrap up this vlog. I also have to figure out how to have a more interesting life, so I have things other than the books to vlog about, because as of right now, this is not a very interesting video, and I know that, but I just don't have a particularly interesting vloggable life. That's that. I will certainly keep making these videos, and they'll be bad for a while, and then they'll get better as I get better, but, I'm it's a learning process. I appreciate you for sticking around with me through it. Okay, so seeing as this is basically the end of the video, let's just wrap up really quickly, couple sentence thoughts about each book that I read. So first, I listened to the audiobook of Cress, which is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles, and it was, in a lot of ways, just like a solid, middle-of-the-road, pretty good young adult science fiction fantasy, but I'm really happy that I read it because I discovered that there's a lot more stories that I can enjoy on audiobook than I originally thought, which definitely increases the amount that I will be able to read going forward. So big positive that I ended up reading that series on audiobook. I'm very happy about that. Second book I read, Her Body and Other Parties. Every short story collection I read, I'm beginning to enjoy short stories in general more, which I'm very happy about because I love the idea of short stories, and so it made me sad that for a long time actually reading them wasn't all that enjoyable to me. Although there were certain parts of this book and stories in this book that I didn't resonate with all that strongly, enough of the book was really gripping and intriguing to me that I'll definitely be reading more short stories in the future, and I definitely already feel more excited and interested in short story books than I have previously. So, box checked there. Also, I've wanted to read that book for so long. I literally put it on hold like 2 years ago at my library, so I'm very glad that I actually managed to get to it and do it and cross it off of my list. And finally, The Bell Jar. I think this was also a win. It was my favorite book that I read out of the 3 that I read for this challenge, and a book that I've owned for 4 years now, and it's always nice to kind of put a dent in my physical stack of books that I need to read. So yeah, that is basically it. Those are my wrapped up thoughts about both my vlogging experience and how to improve it, and also just the books that I read. If you're still here, thanks for sticking with me. I will see you in the next video, whenever that might be.